Noodling away here. Not even. Oh. Welcome, Facebookians. Welcome. I'm looking in the wrong direction. Welcome, Facebookians, to the One Finger at a Time piano lesson. And today I thought we might look at some boogie woogie or variations thereof. And anyway, I was just fooling around. Well, I started off fooling around with the Fat Man by Fats Domino from 1949, which isn't really a boogie woogie, but it's kind of a good way of illustrating that there's different ways of doing this thing, and that's a really basic way. Actually, he did it in F, but I'm going to do it in C for the One Finger at a Time learners, because we've been doing most of our stuff in C as a good launching point. So let's just look at that briefly. So play a C chord in your left hand, and you'll notice I'm leaving out the sensitive note and making it just the C's and G. I'm going with my foot down a little bit on the pedal. So they merge, and you end up with this big sort of wodge of toughness in the bottom end of the piano. And then in the right hand, fairly close in, you could play triad, 3 notes, so it's a triad, not a triplet. A triplet is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Triplet is a rhythmic appellation. This is the name for just the chord, a triad. But we're going to make the triad a little bit more hip by playing it with another G. And so this particular inversion, I keep going on about inversions of chords, because the more you mess with them, the more you learn that they all are subtly different in the effect that they bring to the piece of music you're playing. And in this particular instance, we're playing, oh, there's a little fly there. We're doing something pretty tough. See how strong that is? It's because the only 3 that you're hearing is in this chord right there, and all the rest of this is just strong foundations. So just to I don't want to spend too long on this, because we're going to get into some boogie woogie riffs, but this is interesting just because if you follow these shapes, you can actually groove pretty good without really doing very much. Well, they call me the Fat Man, 'cause I weigh 200 pounds. All the girls, they love me 'cause I know my way around. Slow that down. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. There's your C chord. And you see it in the right hand. Now we're going, we're taking this out. Put a G either side. That's a G, or 5. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, starting from 1, which is C in this instance. And you just do exactly the same thing in F. But instead of you could just move the whole thing to G, like we just did for F. But when we get in this instance, when we get to G, we're playing those two notes, because then it becomes part of a riff. And your right hand is playing through the course of the chord, the progression, the chords, C here, F here, and then C again. And when it comes down to go down to G, I'm not moving my right hand too much. I'm just changing these two notes to this. Because I want to make this into a riff that ties up the end. Because that's G. Sorry, that's C. And just by changing these notes, we're making it to a G7th. Excuse me. That's the Fat Man. Originally, the Fat Man was in F. Fats Domino, 1949, The Fat Man. Okay, well that was just a little prelude. Basically, don't worry too much about all the details. I like to throw some stuff in there that's, like a carrot dangling way on the horizon. Stuff that's outside of the grasp of a beginner, because that's good to get a little taste of what you can do, even if you can't do it yet, of what's possible. But the point of showing you that is, and as I said, just then I was playing it in F, before I was playing it in C, was that you can play a kind of boogie without really doing much in the left hand other than just... When you do that, that's called vamping. You just vamp, you're grooving. But we can get much more interesting with the left hand, and that's kind of what the lesson today is going to be about. It's boogie woogie. I'm going to show you a couple of ways of approaching boogie. There's lots of ways of doing it, and there are guys who are real experts at this. I'm not one of them. I like boogie woogie. I get a bit bored with it if I hear it too much. Much as the Eskimos have many words for snow, real aficionados have an infinite variety of ways of playing a boogie woogie. And just to give you a bit of historical context, boogie woogie was a style that came out. The three most famous exponents of the boogie woogie genre were Pete Johnson, Albert Ammons, and Meade Lux Lewis, none of whom were from New Orleans. But they had a big influence, and it was quite controversial at the time. And a lot of established jazz piano players thought it was pretty vulgar. I think to them it probably was a bit similar to the way a lot of rap sounds to a lot of musicians. Now it just didn't seem to have much musical context, and guys like Fats Waller would even have it in their contract that they would not be required to play boogie woogie, even if it was requested. They refused to play it. I think it's kind of fun, and it's hip, and it's good. It's good fun to play on a piano. So we'll just delve in with some boogie woogie, and we'll do it in C. I tend to always go for this voicing, as I just mentioned, C major is comprised of 3 notes. I keep going over and over and over this because it takes a long while for this to sink in if you're not familiar with music and you're starting out. So C major consists of these 3 notes. It's the very first chord we started with in the first lesson when we did Lean on Me. And I keep going on and on about inversions of the chord, the different ways you can arrange the sequence of these 3 notes. So you can do it like that. Or you can do it like this. It's the same 3 notes, just in a different order. And if you take this inversion, the second inversion, where you have a G at the bottom, then a C, then an E, as opposed to this. Basically taking this G here and putting it at the bottom. But then you add another G there. Now, you're playing the chord in such a way as to emphasize the role that this note plays in the chord by strengthening it by adding an octave to it, an octave higher, the same note, G. So now, this note, it's going somewhere. It's leading. It's bringing information to the chord which says this chord is not static. It's hard to find the right adjectives when you're talking about music because the whole point of music is that it gives you a language that exists in a world where words don't exist, but we need to use words as well as possible. This is loaded with intent and a hint, very strong hint, that something's going to happen. This one isn't. It's the same chord, exactly the same notes, just voiced in a different way. This is sitting down and isn't going anywhere. It's been somewhere and now you got home and now you're in your comfortable armchair with a cup of tea watching the telly. That's what that is. This one here is, no, I've had enough of that, I'm going out. It's going somewhere. So to that extent, it creates a slight air of excitement, of anticipation, an idea that something's going to happen. This is what I think about it anyway. There's probably lots of other musicians who haven't listened to this and haven't got a clue what I'm going on about. But I'm trying to describe it. So this is your right hand, my right hand beat. And it's also very convenient because there's up here at the top. And it's no coincidence that you find this is something that's used a lot by all the New Orleans piano players. Fats Domino, Mac Rebennack, James Booker, Alan Toussaint. Right at the top of the chord you have within your grasp an easy vocabulary of basic rhythm and blues, kind of Lego building blocks. The building blocks that make up Tipatina, or Stagger Lee, or any number of tunes. So anyway, take that as your standard right hand voicing of the chord of C, for now anyway, until you find one that you like better. And then the left hand, let's look at a boogie woogie pattern. You're just playing the C chord, it's the same notes as you've got in the right hand. Try playing it slowly. The important thing is for it to swing. It's going to take you a little minute just to... Same for G. most of the work's being done in the hand, really, in these fingers, rather than too much up here. When you start getting into it, what a lot of the New Orleans, a lot pedal here, same effect. First of all, tangible in there that makes listeners dig it, makes it sexy. You see, I'm playing with that, toying with that idea, which is blurring the distinction between the sad chord and the not sad chord. And the beauty of playing in C is why I do this, why I start all these things in C, is that the same thing can be done when you go to F and G, the third of the three chords. It's kind of hard to play fast at first, but it works better when it's fast, and you've got to just practice this. Until it becomes automatic. Almost to the point where you can just leave your left hand alone and know that it's going to work its way around those changes with accuracy and with keeping a groove. And then you can concentrate on the playground, which goes from here to here, which is where you embellish on top. And you know, that's the hard thing about boogie woogies. You're doing two different things, a lot of stuff going on at the same time, and a lot of people who are not musicians say, how on earth do you know what note, how can you, they can't, and especially when they learn that you're making it up as you go along. Well, improvisation and making up as you go along is not quite as remarkable as it might have first seemed to a non-musician, because what you're really doing is drawing on your vast library of riffs and expressions and using them to create sentences, much in the same way as you do when you use groups of words. When you're speaking, you don't think about each individual letter of each individual word as you're saying, of random ideas that come together and cohere as a sentence. And you know, that's what you're doing with the piano too. You already build up, and that's what we've been doing every week with this thing, is gradually building up sets of musical phrases using the same building blocks and the same ingredients. So anyway, I'm talking, but I'll just give you a little taste of like a New Orleans style. There's another one, and so they developed lots and lots of small variations within the basic style, and there are some guys who do nothing but play boogie woogie. They have boogie woogies come in and do it. It's great. My ears get a bit tired of it after a few minutes, but I think it's a great thing to be able to play. It's fun if you have friends come around and you play a little boogie woogie. I'm showing you that in a simple way because the next stage is to make it walk, something really stiff. It's got to be loose and relaxed, but you basically lock your little finger and your thumb at a certain distance apart, and that way you know that if you just look at your little finger, go to this note, then you know that your thumb is going to be in the right place to hit that. It's not going to sound like this. And so you've got to practice this slowly. And once again, this is a fault. All these are points at which different muscles can carry the weight, and you're using all of them really, because if you get to the point where you're doing this fast, there's a lot of physical action going on there, so you need to distribute all that stuff amongst all those muscles. Once again, it's lock, because the distance between here and here is exactly the same as the distance between here and here, or here and here, or here and there for that matter. All the keys are equally spaced out, so you know, it's going to be a little bit of variety. When you get a bit more familiar with chord relations and substitutions and whatever, then you can get into the interesting within that. But to start with, just stick with C, F and G, the basic blues. You can slow that down. I'm just looking at the thumb. I'm not even looking at the little finger, because I know that if the thumb's in the right place, then the little finger's going to be in the right place. And it's the little finger that's playing the note first. In position, then I know that your thumb is going to be in the right place. And now one last little trick which I like to use is if these are locked in, then this finger automatically falls as well as this one, and do the same thing, and you get this. And then when you play it in a boogie woogie, you can't really hear it, but it makes the whole